In today's video, I want to discuss the M3 Pro MacBook Pro 14-inch. Now, I've been using MacBook Pros for years. When I originally got into the Apple ecosystem, I picked up the 15-inch MacBook Pro, and I used that from 2008 all the way up to 2020, where I picked up actually two computers. I picked up a 27-inch iMac that was Intel based that had the H.265 encoders, so I could easily edit that, which was hard on Intel Macs prior. And I also picked up an M1 MacBook Air. Now, you may have seen I've done plenty of videos on the M1 MacBook Air because I use that as my travel computer because of how small it was, but also how powerful it was for the price, which we never really saw power like that in a base model computer from Apple up until the release of Apple Silicon. Now, over the years, I started to travel more and more, and after using the MacBook Air for 3 years at this point, one of the things that really bothered me more than anything, more than performance, more than the graphic limitations, was actually the problem of it only having two Thunderbolt 3 ports. So when Apple announced the new M3 computers, one of the reasons I wanted to move to them is, as you see right here, we've got all these different ports. You know, you have the MagSafe port, you've got two Thunderbolt 4 ports, you've got another Thunderbolt 4 port, you've got an HDMI. The ports was a really big thing. But one of the things that happened when I saw the reviews was I got a little bit of FOMO because most of the reviews spoke about getting the M3 Max. I didn't necessarily want to drop over $3,000 on a base model M3 Max. It just didn't make sense to me, but I felt like if I went for the M3 Pro, I may have been getting something that's what I needed, but maybe wasn't as powerful as my 27-inch iMac. So after seeing all those M3 Max reviews, I felt that if I got the base model M3 Pro, which had the 11-core CPU and the 14-core GPU, that I may have not been getting the power I needed because of the FOMO. And so I ended up picking up the 12-core CPU, 18-core GPU version of the M3 Pro, which is this. I still went with the 18 gigabytes of RAM, but I did go with a 1 terabyte hard drive because coming from the M1 MacBook Air, I was base model. I had an 8-core CPU, a 7-core GPU, and only 256 gigabytes of storage, not to mention 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now, I gotta be honest, for most of what I needed, that computer pretty much did everything performance-wise. But after using it for a while, having to bring an additional hard drive with me everywhere to be able to edit off of, because obviously I couldn't keep any storage on 256 gigs, and then bringing a bunch of peripherals in order to actually offload files, like when I bring my FX30, the Red Komodo, whatever cameras I was using, I needed to be able to use that computer to offload, which meant I had to bring a bunch of dongles. And then when I forgot to bring those dongles for whatever reason, it created a big issue where I had to go out and buy some. And I just didn't like that I had to remember to bring all of these things. So I have had my eye on the MacBook Pro for a little bit, and specifically the 14-inch, because after using the 15-inch for many years, I knew that a 15 or 16-inch laptop was a little bit too big for me, but a 14-inch was kind of that perfect space because this 14-inch isn't much bigger overall than the M1 MacBook Air, but it's obviously a lot more powerful with a lot more ports. So I picked up this computer really more for the ports over anything else because the performance wasn't a huge issue for me. The 8 gigabytes of RAM, because I didn't really have anything on my hard drive in that computer, I never really ran into any major issues, but I also wasn't doing any major editing up until really this year, 2023. Now this year, I started traveling and going on gigs that were a lot longer than a few days, some of them lasting almost a month. And when I'm gone for that long, I do have editing jobs, more complex editing jobs that I needed a little bit more power on the higher end in order to do. So when Apple announced the M3s, that's why I picked it up. But one of the things I was very surprised about when I started using this M3 Pro was how powerful the M3 Pro actually is and how underrated I think a lot of people are probably going to think it is, especially because most of the creators out there are pushing the M3 Max, and I get it. It seems that that was kind of the computer that Apple was pushing out. So I want to discuss how powerful this computer actually is, and why I think whether you get the base model M3 Pro, meaning you either get the 11 CPU and 14 GPU core, or the 12 CPU and 18 GPU core, regardless of either one that you get, I actually think both of those are going to work out for the majority of content creators, even if you're filming on cameras like the Red Komodo. So as far as my editing programs, the main program I use is DaVinci Resolve, which worked fantastic with the M1 MacBook Air and on my 27-inch iMac. So I never really had any issues with that. I also used Adobe Premiere, which didn't work so well when I first got the M1 MacBook Air, but it always worked flawless on my 27-inch iMac. And it really just depends on who I'm working for, what they need. That dictates which program I use, but I stick with DaVinci most of the time. So as you can imagine, when I got this M3 Pro, both DaVinci and Premiere work flawlessly on this thing. And at that point, I decided, let's do some tests to see what the benchmarks are on the M3 Pro compared to my 27-inch iMac. And then I also did some benchmarks compared to my M1 MacBook Air. And it really surprised me how powerful the CPU is even on the M1 MacBook Air. But then what surprised me even more is the GPU performance in the M3 Pro Macbook Pro is absolutely stellar. Now, my 27-inch iMac pretty much handles everything I throw at it, from red footage to Blackmagic footage to this Sony footage in the FX30 that's H.265 to even the CDNG files that I have to transcode, because in order to film raw video on the FX30, you got to use an Atomos Ninja V. It shoots in ProRes RAW, which isn't compatible with DaVinci. I've got some videos on that. I'll put a link in the description below. But it handled pretty much everything. So I wasn't really trying to get a laptop. This is the M3 Pro with the case on it right here. I wasn't consciously trying to get a laptop that beat the performance of my 27-inch iMac just because I was happy with it. However, after seeing the performance in the benchmark tests, this computer does heavily beat the performance of my 27-inch iMac. And that led me to the realization that I can be using this computer a lot more. And now, one of the things that I've been stuck since I've been using a desktop for the past few years is when I have these major edits, I'm basically stuck in my office working on them. And whenever I was on the go, I was doing light editing just because I didn't have the power. It was also a smaller screen. I just didn't feel like I wanted to work on these, especially because I wanted to use a mouse. And like the main thing was, whenever I needed the M1 MacBook Air to work and be functional, it was almost like making it into a portable desktop. Whereas moving to this M3 MacBook Air, I know I keep picking it up, it's actually been able to let me do edits on the go and have the power and the flexibility to just bring this. You know, it has an SD card reader, so I can grab the files directly off my FX30, just like I'm going to do after this video. So it actually, weirdly enough, makes me feel that I think for a lot of creators, the M3 Max is a little overhyped, and it's pretty expensive when you're not necessarily going to need that power. And that's really the main reason I just wanted to talk about it in today's video, because I've been extremely happy with the performance. It's definitely more than I need. And looking back on it, I actually think I could have gone with the base model M3 Pro, since it has the same amount of RAM and it does have 512 gigs versus 1 terabyte. I definitely could have made that work, but for the extra 400, I got the bigger hard drive, I got the better CPU and GPU, and this computer is going to last me for the next at least 5 years. So I'm really happy with the choice. And at this point, you may be wondering, well, what's going to happen with the M1 MacBook Air that I have? And it still works really well. So what we've decided to do was we brought the M1 MacBook Air to my office, where we do a lot of live stream podcasts, and we're actually leaving it as an office streaming computer because it always worked fantastic for it. Even for the live streams here on Reach Films, I used the M1 MacBook Pro, hooked it up to my A10 Mini, and I was able to use it, no issues whatsoever. So that thing's still going to have life for many years. And it's funny to see, even clicking on programs, them opening up right away. The M1 computers are still a fantastic value. I just think now that these newer computers are coming out, we're seeing a higher bump in performance. And then we're also seeing more ports. I mean, not only do you get more ports on this, I can hook this up to 2 monitors versus 1 external monitor on the base model M1. So I do plan on doing more content on the M3 Pro Macbook Pro, but I wanted to discuss why I did it. And although I've been speaking about how great the value proposition of the M1 MacBook Air is, I think now that we're in 2023, you can pick up used M1 Pro, M1 Max, MacBook Pros and get really good deals on them that really get close to the price of the M1 MacBook Air. Again, used versus new. At this point, the M1 MacBook Pros will obviously outperform the M1 MacBook Air. They've got built-in cooling. There's just a lot more going on in those computers, and you get a lot more bang for your buck if you do get a used version of that computer. I think even though you could still buy the M1 MacBook Air brand new, I think it's starting to kind of lose its value proposition since it's still the exact same price I purchased it back in 2020. If you're really looking to maximize your budget and you can't afford a new laptop and you get an M1 MacBook Air used, maybe you pick one up for $500, it may be worth it for you. But if you're filming on the kinds of cameras like I am, and you're trying to look for your main computer, because again, the M1 MacBook Air was not my main computer. It was my travel computer, whereas now this is going to be a mix of my travel computer and my main computer that lets me edit from wherever I need to with incredible battery life and performance. Now, the only computer that I thought about getting that I obviously decided not to, and I'm not quite sure what its value proposition is going to be, is the base model M3 MacBook Pro. Now, they came out with an M3 MacBook Pro. The brand new base model M3 MacBook Pro, you can get it in the traditional colors. You can't get it in this space black, which, whatever, that's not really a big deal. It's also missing one of the Thunderbolt 4 ports on the side. But one of the things I thought about is it's $1,600 for the base model M3 MacBook Pro. 8 gigabytes if you're using it as your main computer. Could you make it work? Yeah. Should you make it work? No, you should upgrade to 16. But then the second you upgrade to 16 gigabytes, you're almost to the price of the base model M3 Pro MacBook Pro. So at that point, I would absolutely recommend just going to the base model because you get more CPU performance, more GPU performance, and you get 18 gigabytes included with that base model M3 Pro. So I think if you're looking at the base model M3 and you're looking to just save the most amount of money, I'd probably wait at this point to get a MacBook Air, whatever the M3 MacBook Air ends up being, unless, and this is kind of the big asterisk here, the only reason I would go for the M3 base model MacBook Pro is if you need the ports just like I did, but you can't afford to make the jump to the M3 Pro. Otherwise, I would just wait for the base model M3 MacBook Air because that computer is obviously going to be fantastic. But after going through all this, if you're a video professional, definitely stick with the M3 Pro. Although everyone's talking about the M3 Max, it is going to have way more performance. And here in 2023, it will be able to handle most cameras, if not every camera. And unless you're doing crazy graphical VFX work, you're shooting stuff that's along the lines of Avengers Endgame, you know, that has just crazy VFX going on. You're using motion, a lot of just crazy VFX software. If you're doing video editing, and that's really all you're doing, video editing, color grading, whatnot, you can totally make the M3 Pro not only work, but it'll be way more than you need. So if you have any questions, any videos you want to see on the M3 Pro, make sure to ask in the comments below. And if you got knowledge and value out of today's video, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos from the channel. Till next time, my name is Geoff Fagien. Thank you for watching, everybody, and I will catch you in the next video.